other, right?
Yes,
So,
yes. Alan, we have met when we were working at Arasco. We met.
Yes, long time ago. My goodness.
Long time ago. That's right.
Yes.
8-9 years back.
At least,
yeah, it's
at
maybe
least.
more.
Actually,
It's
some of
maybe
it
more.
was going back 14 years, I think, 15 years for me.
That's right. That's
So I had quite a long
2011.
relationship with them, extending over about 4 years.
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. That's great. We are reuniting again after a long time. Yeah. So what time is it, Alan, with you?
With me, it's just coming up to 9:30.
Wow.
So I'm at my home just outside London. So shivering as usual. It's about 4 degrees, miserable grey day. So I'm looking forward to returning shortly to the Gulf and Singapore and Australia.
Yeah. I think it's yeah, it is 11 o'clock. Yeah. Or-
Mihai, where are you based?
Most of the time in Bucharest, in Romania.
Sure, yeah.
But from time to time, I have other places where I do my work.
Sure. I do most of my work in the Middle East.
Well, that's pleasant.
Yes, yeah. Particularly this time of year, it's very pleasant.
Yeah.
July and August we can forget, but
Yeah.
That's right. July, August is not the best of months.
Yeah. Fantastic. So I had an interaction with Mihai in 2009, actually, in Riyadh. So from since then,
In Riyadh or in Doha? I don't remember.
in Riyadh.
Oh, in Riyadh, yeah. Yeah, it's changed a lot during the past decades. It has evolved significantly. You nearly don't recognize places that you've seen 10 years ago.
The Riyadh, what you have visited now, it's a downtown. It's a old city now. So there is a new, complete new Riyadh, which is completely built new in last 3-4 years. You cannot even recognize.
Really?
Yeah. So much.
Yeah.
Let's wait for another couple of minutes so that just people are joining. So let's take 1 or 2 minutes. I'm trying to just. Mihai, your video is in static mode. Is that something for me? It is visible like that, or?
No, it is fine. Actually, it is fine.
No, it's fine. It's maybe if I'm switching away from the WebEx window, it might freeze until I get back to it. But
okay.
Otherwise, it should be fine.
Perfect.
I think that there is a very, very small dog around here in my house. I hope it it doesn't interfere. Usually it doesn't, but just in case, I apologize in advance. I couldn't send him out. It's a little bit cold outside.
Send it out, it will make more noise maybe. So let it be there.
No, it's normally he behaves himself.
Okay, perfect. So shall we just wait for a minute or so, because we are just catching up something, maybe 1 or 2 minutes maximum, and then we'll just start. Okay.
Yeah, I see the YouTube broadcast. Thank you very much. Yeah, very nice. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
So actually, it's interesting.
We can start, I think, right? So let us start with some introductions, and so that we'll just catch up. Yep. So welcome to the Global Strategy Talk Show, Precision in Execution. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first edition of the talk show. So we are very happy to welcome you all, and Happy New Year to you. So that is fantastic way to start New Year. I would like to just highlight the objective of this talk show. The key objective of this talk show is to make sure that we connect the practitioners, experts, and managers at the global scale to the real organizational executives who take up strategy execution, strategy management, strategy transformation, whatever you call the initiatives. Okay, it's not really an initiative; it's an ongoing process. Okay, so to some extent, we are going in the right direction with all support of experts like Mihai, Alan, and Vishwanath, who joined us as a panel members, and very experienced, very interesting audience we are expecting, and then we got very fantastic questions to be asked during the session. Okay, so I take this opportunity to welcome you all on behalf of Data Labs India through Strategy, our strategy management solution. Okay, so thank you for attending the session today. Okay, so I think we will do a quick round of introduction of panelists. We'll start from maybe Alan, then go to Mihai and Vishwanath, right from the in the counterclockwise direction. Alan, please go and introduce yourself.
Surely. Okay. Well, thank you, Abdul. Thank you for the invitation, and good morning or good afternoon or indeed good evening, depending on your time zone. So I'm Alan Fell. I'm a UK practitioner in balanced scorecards and strategy execution. I've had a particular focus on strategy execution for many years, done lots of training programs and worked with lots of clients in terms of helping them to address the subject, and recognizing that the failure rate in successfully executing strategy is rather high. So I'm here both representing Balanced Scorecard Institute, who I do a lot of work with as one of their associates, and also myself on an independent role when I'm in a non-competitive type activity, but a lot of focus. And my interest in all of this is practicality. Most of the work I do is in developing nations, however you categorize them. And so my particular interest in this is getting the basics right. I see so many examples where very simple, easy wins are available. So it's very much a sense of practicality that I focus on this subject. But thank you.
Mihai, please introduce yourself.
My name is Mihai Ionescu. I have been working with strategy for the past 15 years. My basic training it's engineering, and I have started working with the Kaplan and Norton Balanced Scorecard Framework, the Palladium one, since 2008. It's the year when the execution premium has been published. And since then, interacting with many Palladium consultants and trying to apply their knowledge in various projects, typically small and medium enterprises, I have discovered that the framework can be extended, especially into the strategy formulation cycle. And right now I'm working with an integrated strategy formulation cycle and strategy execution one. It's what I call the strategy clockwork. I thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope that we can share some interesting information about strategy execution here.
Fantastic. Welcome. Vishwanath.
Yeah, thank you, Sheikh. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. I'm Vishwanath. I'm a partner with Grant Thornton. Grant Thornton, as you know, is one of the leading full-service advisory firms working across audit, tax, financial advisory, and strategy. Spent close to 22 years in both formulating strategies for small, medium businesses, large conglomerates, as well as getting involved with them in executing the strategy. And Balanced Scorecard is again one of the oft-used frameworks, tools that I've leveraged to help strategy execution. I've also had a fairly large stint as a strategy head in a large business group in India. So I hopefully, as Alan said, would try to bring in the consultant's view combined with the practitioner's view or the industry view of how we can really look at aligning the gap between strategy articulation, which is perhaps a 20,000 feet or a 30,000 feet level document, and really the operating plan and the day-to-day operations, right? And over the years, I've been working with clients which range from India, Middle East, some of them in Africa and in Europe. So that's about me, and very happy to be here as part of this forum.
Welcome, Vishwanath. Thank you. A quick introduction from my side. I'm Sheikh Abdul Khader, CEO of Data Labs India. Okay, so my experience goes in a reverse way. I come from the operational domain. Okay, so I was leading strategy and performance management in an organization. Then after that, I became a consultant. Okay, so usually people do other way around. Okay, so lucky enough to know both the client's point of view and then consultant's point of view. Experienced working with the different experts, consultants, managers. Okay, and also the methodologies. Okay, so seriously started in strategy management in 2008 from Dr. Kaplan and Norton framework introduced as part of execution framing. So since then we keep practicing it, various things. We learned a lot, and then finally, I enjoyed turning up all these experiences into a solution, because I realized that one of the gap, it's not the only gap, it's one of the gap is how you automate strategies. Okay, so if you work, if you have a good thing, yeah. So if you have a good thing,
you kick her in the knee for me, okay? And then when she doesn't think, you kick her in the other knee, okay? Tell her that's from me.
There is some crosstalk, Deep, if you can mute. Okay, so that's how we developed a solution called Flu Strategy to cover up the gap. Okay, that's the background of it. And then when we talk about this, all the experts, they gave fantastic inputs. Then it became the solution what it is today. Okay, so thank you for all contributions to develop our solution, and also as part of that, we want to enjoy collaborating with experts, pioneers, and also managers of the strategy. So I take this opportunity to start the session. Okay, so I think the first topic we will start is we need to connect strategy execution to the strategy planning. So without talking strategy planning to start with, I think we cannot really justify briefing strategy execution part, which is our core concept. So I would like to quickly talk our expert panel to quickly talk about highlights of the strategy plan, what it is to be done. We don't need to take a deep dive into this because we may have another round of this, another session for that. So, and then how this is connected to the strategy execution. So that will be the question for now for us. Then we talk about the leadership. How does what is the role of leadership? How to do that, and then we take it step by step. So I would like to ask Mihai. So can you just quickly introduce the strategy planning part so that we set up the tone for the session today? Mihai.
Strategy planning, it's a necessary part of the strategy management process. However, it's only one of the processes. In order for the strategic planning to make sense, it has to be fed with the necessary information by the strategy formulation process, and then the output of the strategic planning, which is a strategic plan, needs to be aligned throughout the organization, horizontally, vertically, down to the individual level, because the strategy execution happens at the individual level. And then to be integrated with the operations, with budget, with operational planning, with the readiness plans for HR and IT, with continuous improvement programs like Lean Six Sigma and others. And only then we can start executing the plan. And we do that by reviewing, mostly focused on identifying the invalid hypothesis that we have built, because the strategic plan is a construct of hypothesis about the future. Same as a strategy is a construct of hypothesis about the future. And during the review process that happens periodically within the strategic plan execution, which is most of the cycle, of the typically yearly cycle, we look for invalid hypotheses, because always some of the hypotheses that we're employing are invalid, and it's impossible to be otherwise, because it's about the future, and unless we have a crystal ball in our pocket, we can't foresee the future. Therefore, some of the hypotheses that we're using in our decisions about strategic plans components and about the strategy models components are invalid. We don't know which ones. So therefore, the execution of the strategic plan gives us the possibility and the opportunity to identify the invalid hypothesis, modify or replace them together with the components that have been based on those hypotheses, and go ahead in executing an updated plan and sometimes an updated strategy. So that's the role of strategic planning. Actually, is a place of strategic planning within the larger strategy management process. And the strategic planning itself, it's something that it's built on components that depend on the framework that it's used. And in the case of the balanced scorecard framework, it's mainly about the causality between the strategic objectives, the strategy map, and the strategic initiatives that are required to close the gaps, the strategic gaps inside each strategic objective. And the KPIs, which are actually not used to measure processes, as too many people believe. They are used to help us identify the hypotheses, the valid or invalid hypotheses that have been used. Any KPI in red means that one or more hypotheses are invalid that have been used. And which ones? It might be a hypothesis about the strategic initiative, about an objective, about the capability on the strategy side. So that's how we build the scorecards for the that are associated with the strategy maps. That's the essence of strategic planning. And then, of course, the causality allows us to sequence the achieving of the strategic objectives and the sequencing of the initiatives. We can't start all the initiatives in 1st of January. So just a few words about the strategic planning, how it works, and where is it placed within the strategy management cycle.
Fantastic. Yeah. So hypothesis, we'll talk more about that in the second round. Yeah. So great to hear to talk about strategy planning process. Okay. So Vishwanath, you have done many implementations in the strategy planning process. We would like to know about what kind of tools you use. Strategy management is one of the most non-standard process one can find. Okay, there is no standard. From one consultant to another consultant, it's a big difference. Okay, so in our experience, just please try to give the briefing about the strategy planning process, what we had.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a very pertinent question. And I like the fact that you said that strategic planning as a process is perhaps the most non-standard, contextual process you could find. Depending on the industry, depending on the context, and depending on actually the psyche of the promoter, I have seen different kinds of approaches to strategy, right? One of the promoters with whom I was associated, even after 20 years of being in business, used to believe that we don't need to really look at competition because the industry is growing at double digits. I'm growing at double digits. Don't worry about competition. Let's worry about what we need to do, right? Now, that's a very inward out way of looking at strategic planning. Some of the other CEOs with whom I have worked have stressed a lot upon what is going to happen to macroeconomy. And especially if you are in a business where global value chains matter a lot, where you import and you export and you have multiple manufacturing locations, global geopolitics, global macroeconomies become very critical for your strategic planning. So to answer your question, ideal answer from a consultant's point, from a practitioner's point, when I've headed strategy, I've always said, do spend time to get feedback about the outside in view in a very structured manner. And when I say outside, I mainly talk only about 3 variables: the market, which is your consumers, or if you're on a B2B, consumer and consumers. 2, competition, whatever be it. And 3, the whole geopolitical global environment. Now, depending on which industry you are, all these 3 variables can become very critical, or one of them precedence. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the whole inward out view, saying what skills, capabilities, assets, resources we have, what can we build on, what do we need to build more, and so on. As a process, I have found this to be the best way to approach strategy. Tools significantly vary, and I would perhaps raise a lot of conflict, but often I have found the biggest impediment to a very good strategic planning process is the ask that everything should culminate in a financial budget, right? So you create a 3-year plan, but at the back of the mind, I know all the business managers, the CEO, the COO, everyone is thinking about the budget. And the moment you have the budget, the first thing that comes to your mind intuitively is, last year was X, I need plus Y%. And that, to me, is the first challenge of strategy actually getting implemented, right? Strategy execution has had a lot of good tools. Balance Scorecard is a great tool, but I always keep saying that Balance Scorecard is a slightly heavy tool, but we can still use it effectively. It can be used in a $5 million business. It can also be used for a $5 billion business, right? We need not take all the aspects of a Balance Scorecard and make yourself heavy for it. It's a great tool. X factors, another X matrix is another great tool. I would say for execution, we at least have these 2-3 frameworks. Strategy planning still multiple ways of looking at it: outside in, inside out, bottom up, and so on.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I like the word, don't worry about competitors. That is something fantastic, because the industry is growing very fast, and it does not matter what your competitor is doing. So what you have to do is that matters. Okay. So Alan, I think you are experienced in maybe more than all of us. So please give us your experience in strategy planning process.
Okay, thank you. Just to build on what's been said rather than to repeat it. So what I look at is, what are the problems that I see in planning which have an obvious knock-on into execution? And just a few points to mention. So the first thing I find so often, if I'm going into a company as a consultant, or indeed just running a training program, how many times they have a vision statement which they put so much emphasis on. And I ask 2 simple questions. What does it mean in terms that can be understood by the T-boy, assuming we still have T-boys? And secondly, how do I measure it? And that's usually the end of conversation. I was doing this recently with the board of directors, the board of directors themselves of a medium-sized commercial bank. And they all knew the slogan of the vision, but when I asked them to explain it, the conversation just fell apart. They were guessing, well, it could mean this, and it could mean that, and it could mean something else. And to be honest, I gave them quite a tough time, because I said, you're the board of directors, and you're demonstrating you do not understand what your vision means and what the associated goals are. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty at that level. And again, I need to emphasize, I'm talking with a lot of experience in developing economies rather than advanced developed economies. Very, very different situation. Another thing I see very often, it goes back to what Mahai was saying, strategic initiatives and initiative overload. And that I find is so common. I had a case recently with a large organization, 40,000 people. But when I looked at their strategic plan, they had 146 strategic initiatives. And I looked at it and sort of blinked twice and said, are you sure? Can you cope with all of these? And the president of the company was at great pains to say, yes, they needed all of them. They were all necessary. So I said, well, let's have a look at progress. And every single one without exception was red. Either it had not been started when it should have, or it was running late. And you think, well, This is a combination of unrealistic planning, which inevitably leads to poor execution. So it's just simple, straightforward things like that organizations I find often miss. I mean, KPIs, we could spend hours just on KPIs, I know, but KPIs and particularly targeting, which is unrealistic. And I think the underlying problem is so many organizations and so many people, even at senior level, are not very numerate. And yet they will set KPIs without really understanding the implications of them, the consequences of achieving the KPI targets. So that's my sense of looking at it, is to embrace all the good ideas. And can I just say, and a thank you to Mihai, because I read his LinkedIn articles with great interest and think, wow, that's really great insight there. When I get down to the practical level in a developing economy, just get the basics right. And I think that would be if I had one message this morning or this afternoon, it would be, let's get the basics right.
Perfect. Yeah, I think the interesting thing is how many companies
I think we lost Abdul.
Yes.
Is
oh, okay, he's back.
Yeah, Abdul, you're back.
So I'm just asking, creating a vision statement. So how many companies do you think really they make real meaningful vision statements and people understand this? What could be the percentage? Like, is it like 50%, 60%? What do you think, Alan?
Far lower, far lower from what I see.
Okay, so then that's very interesting. That's very interesting.
I mean, I tend to exaggerate on these statistics, but I would say 9 out of 10 vision statements are hardly worth the paper they're written on. Because although they look nice, the moment you ask, what does it really mean? And therefore, at the start point, or one of the key start points of developing a strategic plan, if we don't really understand the destination we're trying to reach, it's a bit difficult to plan the journey. And so many of them fall down when you start to ask searching questions on what the vision statement means.
Perfect.
So that's my issue.
Kanath, you would like to add something for this?
Yeah, I second Alan. Almost every company has a vision, right? You see them in placards, you see them in the boardrooms, you see them. But when you ask, all right, how does this vision or a value translate into how you are going about your strategy? There is an eerie silence in the room.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Right? Vision is great if you want to use it as a milestone. I want to become in which case you're really saying this is like a target setting, right? I want to become an X million dollar enterprise or a Y million dollar profit. You're then using the vision as a more quantified state. But otherwise, I want to spread happiness or I want to be in consumer delight is a great English vision statement. The challenge is, what does it really mean in terms of the businesses you will enter? What does it mean in terms of strategic choices you will make? What does it mean in terms of the operating model? I think there, I would say many companies do not have that alignment. That's my take. I mean, some of my clients may perhaps stop my engagement, but that's the...
Perfect. I think that means that's a gap. Okay, that's a gap. Okay. So Mihai, what do you think? I read your text in the message. So, missing vision values. Just pick, so that we'll move to the new topic. Yeah.
Yeah, people might say that I like to be a contrarian. Not really. I'm based on logic, and I've discovered over time that mission, vision, and values it's very difficult to build a strategy from starting from them. At least they contradict with the logic of making strategic choices and understanding what needs to be done in order to turn them to reality. That's why in the past couple of years, I've actually discouraged people to even discuss about mission, vision, values upfront. I realize that they are actually, in order to be able to make those statements correct, we don't have enough information at the beginning. We will have information once we go through the strategy formulation process. At a certain moment in time, yes, we will be able to synthesize our strategy using mission, vision, and values, but not initially. Initially, we start from something completely different. We start from understanding the challenges that we have, understanding the trends, the weak signals, the unfolding circumstances, what is going on, and what choices do we have in order to achieve the success aspirations that we have defined. And in order to do that, we select the choices, we compare with the current choices, because our strategic choices on the two dimensions of the strategy, problems to solve and solutions to deliver for them. The strategic choices are the foundation of the strategy, and we need to compare our existing, because we already have a strategy at the moment when we are talking about the new strategy. So we can compare the as-is strategy, which means the as-is strategic choices, the capabilities that are supporting them, with the, if you like, the destination or to-be strategic choices, which promise us to allow us to achieve our success aspirations, even better if we quantify them. So, and of course that comes as a consequence with what new activities needed to do in order to turn those new strategic choices into reality, what capabilities are missing or needs to be reconfigured, and then little by little we go into the meaningful part of the strategy, which means what exactly do we need to change in our organization, what do we need to add, and in what sequence. And that is the main output of a meaningful strategy. And of course, if you like, as a byproduct, you can synthesize that as mission, vision, value as well. But the strategic gaps are quantified, success aspirations, the sequencing of closing those strategic gaps are the bread and butter, the most meaningful input into strategic planning. So we need to go through a staged process of generating the strategy, and then we have the input necessary to start doing the strategic planning. So unfortunately, that's not very convergent with many views on how to do strategy, starting from as a vision, from the mission, from values. But that's what I've discovered in practice to work much better.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I think I agree that to start the strategy planning process, in every strategy management textbook, if you see it, first thing what they said, you come up with the mission, vision, and values. Okay, I think upfront defining them is not something easy. So you need to do some kind of strategy formulation process so that you come up with meaningful vision, mission, and value statements. That's fine. I think let us jump into our key area of strategy execution. Okay, so to start with, since we are talking about strategy planning, vision, mission, values, and many other things, let us talk about the leadership. Okay, so what is the role of leadership in the whole strategy planning process and strategy execution? Primarily with the strategy execution process, keep it in mind. So what is the readiness of the leadership, and what is the commitment expected from the leadership? I think this area is very, people don't talk about it, even in the organizations. Even if they have, if they're not happy with the process, People don't talk about it. I think with your experience, I would like to hear what is real thing causing the problem, both in successful organizations and also in failure. So, what kind of gap you find the leadership responsibility and role, Alan?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's a big subject, and of course, leadership is a massive subject in its own right, and leaders come in all shapes and sizes and have lots of different characteristics. We can think of iconic leaders and the different characteristics they bring. I think in terms of strategy execution, so to focus specifically on the execution side, the leadership is a lot to do not only with the process of leadership and sort of being involved in review meetings, being involved in discussions on, as Mihai was saying about, is this hypothesis working out? What are the assumptions? Do we need to change? How do we keep agile and so on and so on? But I think to be seen as the visible head of the organization who is driving to implement whatever is the plan. Never mind what the plan is, whatever is the plan, are they driving to deliver it? And some leaders are spectacularly successful at that and instinctively think strategically. You and I both know a gentleman who I had enormous respect for in Saudi Arabia, who I think, thought instinctively in a strategic mindset and conveyed that in all of his discussions. But I find too many leaders think that strategy and particularly the execution side, all they want to do is have a plan. Once they've got a plan in their mind, it's tick the box, put it on the shelf and kind of move on. And they're back to the operations, which are the comfort zone. So I think a lot of the leadership goes back to how well the leader is supported in the organization by key people and key processes. It's not a one-man or one-woman job. It's collective. But if, for example, you have a good strategy management office or whatever you choose to call it, and they are acting in a proactive role, not simply keeping the score, then I think they are a big enabler, big support to the chief executive or whatever leadership position. But it is this level of focus that I see sometimes works beautifully, and you really admire it, and I wish I could package that. But so many times you see it as poor, and people are not sufficiently interested. They're too busy to be bothered about the execution. They will set up something like a monthly review meeting. I mean, classically through a balanced scorecard type system of one sort or another. And then the month comes along and, we're a bit too busy this month. I had a case recently, someone saying, well, we're too busy doing the budget, so we'll cancel the strategic review meeting because we're all very busy doing the detailed budget. And you just think, this is, in my humble judgment, this is wrong prioritization and wrong leadership. So it's perceived behavior and actually making things work well. But there's no one single style of leadership that works in this.
Yep. Thank you. So what do you think, Mihai? I think this is a very important question.
Well, I think that the people need to sleep on the bed that they are making. So if they set their bed wrong, they should, get the deserved uncomfortable sleep overnight, which translates in other words, if they can't understand the necessity of a system to manage strategy, just leave them to their fate. You don't need to help everybody. Don't need to consult every company in the world. They need to learn maybe the hard way. And if they don't have leaders open-minded enough and visionary enough to understand the role the other layer of management and operations, which is strategy, then they deserve their fates. They should be left alone until they will understand, or they will be replaced with someone who does. So I think that over investing in educating people, in convincing people that they should use a strategy management system, it's really the civilization needs to advance, not to stay in place and waste time convincing people who don't want to learn, who don't want to read books, who don't want to change their mind. So really, if you encounter them and they say, well, we don't really want to do this, and then we're going to do it, let's do quarterly meetings instead of monthly meeting, or once a year or something. Said, okay, then fair enough, but I'm busy with people who understand what needs to be done, not with you. So you should start learning to say no to people who have a very big gap in understanding how strategy and operations work together. You need to invest time and effort to help them understand. But if they are stubborn, let them to their fate. They don't need to necessarily educate everybody on how to use strategy. That's my conclusions and practical conclusion from life. And yeah. I'm sorry it sounds a little bit abrupt, but that's what I've learned.
Exactly.
Can I just add to that? Because I have a great deal of sympathy with what's just been said. And I'm reminded of a survey done a long time ago now. And they basically concluded that of chief executives that are dismissed by the organization, in other words, by the board of directors, 70% of it was failure to execute strategy. In other words, they're not engaged and they pay the price. So I'm very sympathetic to what Mihai has just said, I have to say. But the question then I would raise is, what about the board of directors or the public sector equivalent? Are they fulfilling their role and replacing? Because my experience is that chief executives who behave poorly on this subject quickly get turned over.
Perfect. That's fantastic discussion. I totally agree. First of all, what I think is the leader, he must understand how this whole strategy management system works. Okay, so the moment he understands, he should engage the right people in the beginning. So get the right core team. We call it as a. So I was fortunately one of the core team member in the strategy transformation program. So I understand. I closely working with some senior leaders. So you cannot really change everybody because they don't want to learn. Okay, so you cannot keep spending time. What Mihai said. Okay, so you build core team who really believes in the system, and then build on top of it. And then if somebody is really stopping you to do that, beware of them. So don't really encourage them to stop. Okay, so this is something which is very important. Yeah, Vishwanath. So let us conclude on this topic, please.
Yeah. No, I think it's all very interesting point in the sense that today, if you randomly select 30 CEOs and you go ask them, what's your view on strategic planning? I think majority of them are going to tell you, boss, today it's so volatile. It was COVID. After COVID was maybe some supply chain issue. After that is another geopolitical event. I mean, we just can't sit and plan. I think the first culture of a good leader is to understand that variables will always keep changing, right? There will always be geopolitical currents. There will always be supply chain issues. There will always be competitor actions. A strategic plan is not something that you cast in stone. So the culture is to understand and appreciate. At the end of the day, a strategic plan is to at least say that this is a North Star towards which we want to move. And in this journey, we are clear. We will not do certain things. We will try to do certain things. And as the journey starts and conditions change, assumptions change, you will have to improvise. The second culture of a good leader who should drive a strategy execution is to respect a I always say strategy has three big elements from my practice: assumptions, the hypothesis, the cause and effect. Now, the leadership culture has to respect these three. That look, we made an assumption on a certain growth rate in the macroeconomy. Now, something happened in some part of the world, that assumption is off the whack. Therefore, what happens to our business? That's the second thing. The third is to really sit back and say, I mean, we don't need 10 days of strategic review time, right? If a strategy is made, all we need is 8 to 9 hours of dedicated review where the focus is on the strategy and the assumptions, the hypothesis. The leadership has to give priority to that at least once a month, and I think it warrants giving importance to that once a month. I think these three very critical traits of a good leader who wants to drive strategy execution, strategy excellence. Needless to say, again, I may be making a slightly more controversial statement, a slightly more left brain kind of a leader, right? The more artistic ones, I'm not saying are bad, but I've just seen from my experience, and it's only my limited experience. So pardon people if you have otherwise. The guys are more high on innovation. They don't respect a standard review process, and we all agree that when you have a strategic review process, there has to be at least 50% of the thing has to be standardized. Has to we select certain KPIs, certain metrics, certain assumptions, certain variables. I think these four things come to my mind.
Great. I think you nailed the point. I think there is a too much discussion. We can end up in another 2-3 hours in scenario planning and all those things. Yeah. So I will ask you one question, very critical question. Now, what is the first thing the leadership do when we engage into a strategy transformation program, or you call it as a strategy management system implementation, whatever? So first thing what they try to do is to select a consultant. Okay. Now I have a very different kind of people who look for consultants. Some people look for consultant who have the same who have the experience in the same industry. So what is your experience to have the same industry, and how did you help other companies? Some people look for the methodology. The consultant knows about the in and out of the strategy execution planning processes and how he can help us to work as a collaborator. And some people go for the best names. Okay, so whatever you do it, most fancy names kind of thing. So in your opinion, quickly, this is a very important question for every organization. Very quickly touch. How does the company should select a consultant? Very quickly. Then we'll go to the real execution questions. Alan.
Okay. First question is, why do you need a consultant? And I always ask people that. And it's all too easy to rely on a consultant, and however you choose them and whatever background they have and so on and so on. But are you saying that the senior management team, that the employees of the organization, that anyone who's dedicated and has a title, something like planning or strategy management or whatever, do they not have sufficient experience? And if I can just give you one very simple example here. I first got onto balanced scorecards in 1994, which I have to remind myself is 30 years ago. And the first scorecard development I had responsibility to lead. It was a big division of a bank in London. No consultants, no textbooks, no internet, nothing apart from the original Kaplan and Norton article. And by the way, can we just pay tribute to David Norton, who sadly passed away recently? He and Bob Kaplan, between them, one of the great thought leaders, and I think we've all benefited enormously from what they did. But to go back to the scorecard, so we had no outside advice at all. We did it all ourselves. And it was still the most rigorous scorecard application I have seen anywhere in the world. And the reason was the culture, and particularly the leadership, going back to the previous topic, of my boss, who was the overall general manager of the division. And we made it a real focus on executing a significant change in strategy. And broadly, it worked. I mean, you learn all sorts of lessons, you make all sorts of mistakes. But not one single minute of external consulting. And yet I have people who come on training courses today, they do a classic, say, 3-5 day training program. And what's the first thing they do when they get back home? They want to pick up the phone to you and say, well, thank you, I'm now, a certified balanced scorecard professional or whatever. Can you come and help me? And you think, well, you've just been on training, you've got at least some initial training. Do you not have the ability to stand on your own 2 feet? There is an enormous amount of information available. I mean, truly unbelievable amount of information available in this day and age on YouTube, apart from anything else. So do you really need a consultant? To what extent are you admitting defeat before you start? And the other just very quick comment. If you have a consultant, what is the role? What you do not want is one of the big names coming in and to produce a very nice document for you. But when I go in and see some companies, and I say to the chief executive sort of first meeting, you have a strategic plan, and I get a comment something like, you mean the McKinsey document? And I know at that point there is no ownership of the strategy by that management team. It's all with McKinsey's or whoever have done it, and they've no doubt done a good job, very good job. But it's not owned by management. So if it goes wrong, if the execution fails, we wash our hands and we'll blame McKinsey's et al. Those are the things to watch out for me.
Yeah. So what do you think, Mihai? Mm-hmm. How should they select the consultant? What is the key thing? What is in your mind? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the main consultant in a strategy system implementation project, because this is what we're talking about, I guess. The top consultant is the CEO. He needs to get into the shoes of the guy who runs the show. And the most successful implementations that I've seen is when the CEO, or at least someone very, very close to the CEO, like right hand or something like this, gets in the game coordinator role for the implementation project, because initially it is a project. You don't have a management system. You have some various sorts of things, but you don't have it, and you need to implement it for the first time, and then you'll do it again and again, but not implementation. It's just remodeling every year and every strategy cycle. But initially, that is an implementation project. And the role of the consultant, well, first of all, if you don't have competent employees to understand the industry, the trends, the challenges in your business, of course you have no other choice but to employ a consultant, an industry consultant, someone who has the expertise for that industry and tell you, okay, this is going to happen. This is at least what we guess that is going to happen. These are the trends. These are the things that you should do. Stuff like this, which is not really methodology consulting. It's actually industry expertise consulting. So I don't think that we're talking about that. We're talking about implementing a strategy management system. And if you have the CEO or someone very similar to the CEO in the running the show, then the role of a consultant if you don't have methodological expertise inside the company, it's only to facilitate the process. They are going to develop nothing for you. None of those binders and none of those things will come from the consultant. And that's very simple. That consultant is probably very ignorant in your industry. You hold the top expertise in your industry. You know the competitors, the type of customers, the experiences that you had so far, and the challenges that you are confronting with. So therefore, the role of the consultant is only to guide you, to watch over your shoulder and say, okay, we should try this, or we shouldn't do that, and these are the reasons why we should or we shouldn't, based on the knowledge of, in many cases, hundreds or thousands of implementations, which have identified the typical traps in which you can fall during implementing such a system, and therefore their role is there. It's more of a facilitator and taking care that you're not doing mistakes and you have understood the fundamentals of the systems that you're implementing, and clarifies them if they are unclear, and then allow you to go on step by step, because this is a staged process. It's a staged project of implementing it, and just ensures that you're doing it correctly, and guide you and clarify for you whenever necessary, and oversee the way it's going. But again, you and the management team and also involving as many of the people in the company in a open strategy or a strategy dialogue process, you're the ones who are doing it. So again, when you select a consultant who understands very well the methodology. It might be ignorant for the industry that you're in, and do that only if you couldn't get the necessary expertise into the internal team, like they attended courses, training, and so on, or they came from an organization where such a system has been implemented, and then they have the insider know-how about how to do it. That's what I've encountered in practice.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a great insights. Here I take 2 points. If you are hiring a consultant to help you to define industry trends and other things, that is quite required if you have a gap. Okay, it's very much required if you have a gap. I think the majority of consulting firms like PwC, McKinsey, they do a very nice job in helping the companies to define the industry dynamics and all. Okay, but if you are expecting to do if you're expecting your consultant to do both industry trends and also a strategy management process, I think you will be grossly mistaken. Okay, so I come up with a recent request. They are looking for a strategy management consultant who knows the industry very well, deep enough, have experience, and also who knows the process and methodology very well. I tell them it is not really possible. Okay, so it will be he must be a CEO of a company. Okay, instead of a consultant working for himself. Okay, so industry is something, if you have required, I think people get consultants for industry quite often. That's good. Okay, so if you want to have a methodology process, okay, so you need a good facilitator who is knowledgeable about the whole process, who can help you to make sure you are in the right path in the process. Okay, so Vishwanath, what do you think? You do both roles. I know you have done both industry and the methodology. That's the reason I want to hear from you in the last. Yeah.
Right. So yes, I think we need to be very clear. There are only 2 or 3 reasons why a firm or a CEO should look or call a consultant, right? Number 1 is where he's extremely convinced that a senior team might not have the enough bandwidth to complete this process within a certain time. Maybe he wants to do this in 3 months before he has this big board meeting, or there's a transaction or whatever, right? Where the value that the consultant is going to bring in is really project management skills, timeline, get it done. That's number 1. Number two, where the CEO is very convinced that because of a certain kind of skill set that resides in the organization, getting an outside-in view for a process or a template or a governance mechanism is extremely difficult. So often this happens, and when I speak to promoters, the biggest reason that they tell me is, look, all my CXOs have been with me for 25 years, right? Say they joined me when I started this company, they are with me for 25 years. And therefore, I think I need somebody who has seen 10 different companies or 10 different industries, right? And the third point, I think both Alan and Mehul correctly said, I mean, is it that even after a training or reading, are you so very clear that you will not be able to try the first version of the process yourself, right? But only two reasons that stand out as to why you should knock the doors of a consultant. If you're very convinced that the bandwidth is limited, if you're very convinced that perhaps changing the mindset is far more important than the expertise.
Yeah.
Right. And can't only do so much. It takes two hands to clap. I was success program is if you give a consulting project and you assume that the consultant is going to end up giving magic, no.
The voice is breaking, Vishnu.
Yeah. 100% of the consultant will make mistakes, right? So the consultant perhaps can contribute to 50-60% of the success. 50 to 60% of the success still resides within the business. Within the business, right? The CEO, the CXO team, the core strategy team, the OSM office, they are extremely important. They need to own this initiative. Otherwise, you can call whomever you want. They will come, they will present. You will have the PPT slides. It will be a great project, but outcome will be limited. That's my view.
Fantastic. Yeah. So one more question, very interesting, Dr. Salim has raised. Okay. So you need a consultant to bring an outsider perspective, because people don't accept internal consultants. Okay, even if they are really good. Okay. So to push change and also to make sure that the things go in alignment, in an aligned way. So it's always better to have a consultant from outside to facilitate the whole process. That's a good point. Yeah. So from that point of view, yes, we totally agree with that. The outside consultant will do better facilitation than another inside consultants. Now, one more question here is Office of Strategy Management. Now, Office of Strategy Management, they strategies in place. So how true is that? So what is the limitation of Office of Strategy Management? What kind of support they need from the leadership, from CEO? Okay, and what we should not ask OSM to do it. Yeah, Mihai, what do you think?
Well, I think that those who have worked with the execution premium process have seen that the way in which we run the implementation project and the way we organize and create the specific roles for the OSM are extremely instrumental. They are. You just need to follow their specification, and again, that is based on more than 10,000 implementations that has been performed or evaluated by Palladium over, I don't know, 25 years. So they have identified so many traps in which you can fall in relation to how you organize the project and how you set up and enable the OSM. Really, we would be just reinventing the wheel here if we would be trying to create advice and ideas about the OSM, about the implementation process. Those guys in that 1,000 binder, 1,000 page binder have written everything that is necessary for implementing a strategy management system for strategy execution. Of course, we can summarize and talk about the topics in there, but again, it's we just don't need to scratch our heads. Those methodologies have been tested and retested so many times, then we just need to do it. I think that to the level when it resembles some sort of I don't know, very rigorous process like Six Sigma or whatever it's you know, the black belt and so on. Yeah, the reason is an equivalent level of detail and instrumentality into the execution premium process documentation that it's so much based on practice and learning of what works and what doesn't. The Office of Strategy Management obviously needs to be instrumental in a number of roles that they have. There are 3 categories of roles, and I just don't want to just restate what the documentation says. What they shouldn't be doing is they shouldn't be doing strategy. The OSM doesn't do anything related to strategy. They are internal facilitators for the workshops that are performed every year when you do at least the strategic plan for the yearly cycle, but sometimes also you do some reformulation of at least part of the strategy. Again, in workshops which are facilitated, organized, scheduled by the OSM, and they are there to help their colleagues just to remind them what the fundamental concepts are, how the tools work, and what needs to be done. And the strategy is done by the employees themselves, by the team and the executive team, and again by those who need to participate either in the strategic planning or in the alignment, which is some sort of micro strategic planning at departmental level, and then the further individual alignment within each department. So the OSM, it's which initially, when you use the first implementation, there is no OSM. You haven't set it up. It's a core team, as the methodology advises, with their 3 components. And I have seen it work, and the examples that are given and that we take from the so many Palladium consultants or ex-Palladium consultants are so overwhelming in terms of how this is organized. I think there is no secret in how to organize it. It's just a matter of leadership. If you don't have a very clear understanding for the CEO and for the executive team of how this thing should work, and then again, explains them, shows them, trains them. There is no shame in a CEO to participate in a strategy, Kaplan and Norton strategy execution training at all. Okay, they are investing 5 days of their professional life, but that's important for them to understand and to be clear about the process, which is not complicated. It just need to be explained, and then they need to take leadership, and it's extremely important. I have seen implementations that failed just because the CEO wasn't really involved in the process, and I've seen the contrary, where the CEO actually was there in all the workshops, not in those for alignment, because that's not for the executive team to participate. It's only for the department management team to participate. But in the organizational strategic planning, they've been there, and they've managed the discussions. They have stopped the discussion from deviating. They have stopped the rambling about various groups inside the company and their interests and stuff like this. It's extremely important for the CEO and for the executive team to be there in all the workshops, not only at the initial implementation, but every year as workshops when you recreate the strategic plan, when you You set up the alignment. When you do some reformulation workshops, if you need to reformulate part of the strategy. That's what I have learned.
Yeah. Thank you. Fantastic points. OSM basically the key facilitator of the whole strategy management process. Okay, so they should not actually own the strategy planning process. It's a CEO who owns the planning process. That's what I understand based on the discussion. Now, I think I will raise one very important, very conflicting question. Now, what kind of methodology we should use? I don't know. This is a very difficult question, and each one of us and the participants, everybody will have their own opinion. In my opinion, to start with, okay, methodology is very important. To selecting the right methodology for your strategy management is very important. Okay, you should choose it. But how you use it, that depends on you. It's not about methodology. It's about you. No matter what kind of methodology you choose, if you are really doing the thing in a proper way, majority of the methodologies will help you to achieve. Okay, it's all about comprehensiveness. Some methodologies have partial, some methodologies are more comprehensive. Okay, so when you go for more comprehensive methodologies like balanced scorecard, so you have to compromise something an agile nature of OKR kind of thing. So what do you think? So this is it's we will not spend much time on it. Very quickly. What do you think, Vishwanath, about methodology selection? What is the key role?
No, I think you answered you answered it well. I would say how you use is really far more important. Ashek and I think Alan, we have been part of a Harvard business case where they did strategy execution using Excel, right? It really doesn't matter. You don't need to invest $1 million on ERP and automation. The approach, the respect for the process, the respect for strategy management is far more important than any tool. I would maybe stop at that.
Mihai, you have been involved in this discussion for quite a long time, and you have been upfront telling the points what is in your mind. Can you just phrase in a nice way? So, what is the methodology role, and what is the role of leadership in selecting the methodology?
I think the methodology it's essentially a collection of best practices that have been developed by people doing mistakes. We can ignore any methodology and just do trial and error until we succeed. But hopefully, because we're talking about the company strategy, we shouldn't play too much with that, because we might get the company into bankruptcy if we play too much with trial and error with our strategy. So the methodology is it's a collection of things that people have learned from thousands and thousands of iterations of people who have done what we want to do. The methodology tells us how to do things and why not, and it explains what is the logic of doing things, and of course we can ignore, or we say, well, we have something even better than that in the methodology, because we have an extraordinary culture, we do things like this, and we can even improve the methodology, or even replace some of the best practices from there with some things that we already know that works inside our company. But taking the methodology as a blueprint that have been developed from in the hard way. I mean, imagine what happens if you update every year the methodology after a few more hundreds of implementations that happened during the past year. That's what happened to the execution premium process. I've seen at least 5 or 6 yearly versions of the methodology, and I've seen improving it here and there. But obviously, you could tell that the improvements come from mistakes that have been made, from things that people didn't understand correctly, and they couldn't because it was not explained right. And then in the end, the methodology, if you choose the right methodology and the one which has, again, thousands of implementations behind it, then it's a guideline, it's a blueprint for how you should do things. And of course, if you understand it and you find things that work even better in your companies and some parts of that methodology, of course you can use them and have your own version of that methodology.
Perfect. So what I understand is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do experiments.
I'm sorry?
You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, you don't have to do the experiment, and try to adopt the best practices, which is like a proven best practices, and then try to understand how your organization fits into the best practices. Okay. So Alan, you have been all kind of things, you have seen so many implementations.
Sure.
What do you think?
Okay, I first of all would strongly agree with the point that what's more important is how it is used rather than what exactly is the methodology. I would, again, support everything that's been said by my fellow panelists. The way I look at it is ultimately, to make strategy execution work, you are addressing a whole series of issues which experience tells us if we don't do it properly, we have a problem. It may be in initiative overload. It may be in cultural issues and the lack of a performance culture or the lack of a team culture. It may be a poor process of monitoring and reviewing results and taking action. There can be all sorts of things going on. The XPP is the best known process that I'm aware of, which goes beyond the balanced scorecard as seen as the core tool. I think if you ask most people, what is the #1 tool to support strategy execution? The answer is probably going to come out the balanced scorecard. I used to look at it in looking at those various critical success factors, if you like, and say that there are three, I could group them into three main areas. The first one is the plan coherent? And I don't want to go back into the planning side. We're not here to discuss planning as such. But do we have a proper, realistic plan? Is it properly aligned? Do we have that alignment of the individual to the department, to the organization, and the horizontal alignment, and so on, and so on, and so on? Because a lot of problems in execution stem from poor planning, in my experience. The second one is to say, what are the processes that I have to support successful execution? So a good measurement and monitoring, and scorecard is the classic answer to that. Good project management, an effective office of strategy management. We've discussed that point already, I think. And then go on to the third pillar, as I used to call it, the cultural and behavioral issues. Do we work as a team, or do we have silo mentality? Do we have a performance culture or an excuse culture? Very interesting to get people to assess where they are on a sort of scale of excuse at one end and performance at the other, and say where they are now and where they want to be in 2 years' time. And virtually everyone wants to shift to a stronger performance culture until you get them to think about the implications of that. And then people backtrack from it. So I think that the methodology, yes. I mean, I'm involved with the Balanced Scorecard Institute. We've repackaged those into something we're launching on 5 imperatives, which I think works extremely well. But it's not ultimately the methodology, it's how well they're used by management, particularly by the leadership. And I think if you get that right, you can refine your methodology and your process. You can take an off-the-shelf concept and modify it and customize it. I'm a great believer in customizing to suit a particular situation, not just blindly following what I call template mentality. So I think those are the things that would concern me. But I go back to a fundamental point using it. the conduct of the monthly review meeting. I mean, I've seen everything from stuff that you could video and put on YouTube as absolutely best practice to utter horror stories. And yet they will both claim to have a good methodology in terms of planning and execution. It's how it's used and the leadership demonstrated by the leader, whoever that happens to be. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Fantastic. We talk about strategy reviews because we are halfway through the session. Let us talk about something very, very important now. Strategy translation. Okay. So now let us say you have a strategy plan in place and you have done all the assumptions, hypothesis, and you have cause and effect and everything is ready now at the high level. Now you need to define, you need to translate strategy into executable terms. Okay. So here we can call it as a strategic objectives or goals or whatever. And then each objective come up with the measures. How does that? Like this is, I know everybody knows about this. Okay, so how to really define strategic objectives or goals? How to select right KPIs? Okay, and then how to put an owner for this. Now the trend is going on like AI defined measures. Artificial intelligence defined strategic objectives. So is that something is going on a right direction? Because strategy is something we have to think. The organization have to think themselves, not the artificial intelligence support. Now, if I do a good strategy map or strategic objectives, I get a very nice strategy map, balance scorecard, measures for any industry now within 10 minutes. What does that mean? So what is the value of defining strategic objectives and measures? Mihai, so let us start with you. Now let us take some very nice technical things because another 10 minutes maybe we will spend in this. Yep, Mihai.
Well, the reason why I've invested quite a lot of time into understanding the strategy formulation part, which in the Kaplan and Norton execution premium framework, it's very sketchy, represented by the first stage, which they called develop the strategy. And I wasn't satisfied. This is not me. A lot of consultants weren't satisfied with what was there. And I've done my own time investment into understanding what goes on there. Because I wasn't satisfied with the general concept in execution premium process, you start the strategic objectives definition from what is called the value gap. I said, okay, the value gap it does make sense. An objective is to fill a gap, but that's not instrumental enough. And I realized that in order to be able to create some really meaningful strategic objectives, we need to go and pass through the strategy formulation process with the same kind of rigor that we use when we do strategic planning. And that means that in order to provide the necessary input to start the planning process with defining the strategic objectives, we need something very tangible. And by looking into the strategy formulation guidelines for a proper process, starting from strategic choices, going into the required activities and capabilities system for those strategic choices to happen, from comparing that with what we already have, the activities that we know how to do and the capabilities that we already have. Some of those required are missing, or some of the existing ones need to be reconfigured. And little by little, we understand that we have some gaps, competencies that we need to acquire, infrastructures that we need to build, some processes that we need to change to adapt to in order to support the new choices about, I don't know, sales channels or whatever strategic choices they are. And we end up with a number of gaps in all the areas of the company. in the relationship with the stakeholders, with the customers, in the internal processes along the value chain, in infrastructure, in cultural elements related to things that we need to change, in competencies. So we have a long list of gaps. If we can close those gaps tomorrow morning, we have the strategy fully accomplished. But we can't do that by tomorrow morning. It normally takes months and years to do that. So the set of strategic gaps, again, they include a lot of hypotheses. Each and every of them are based on some hypothesis about the future. Why a certain competence is needed, why a certain management system that we never had is needed, and all those are hypotheses. Okay, so we're going to be able to check if they are valid or invalid later on. But we start from a list of strategic gaps that we need to fill, and that is the bread and butter for building strategic objectives. In the cases when I've been there when this was done, it always ended up with probably 100 or 200 strategic gaps that needs to be filled. Because everybody participating said, okay, in my logistics part, the gaps that correspond to what you have defined as strategic choices would be this and that, and in HR others, and so on. So typically, it's you start strategic planning with a long list of strategic gaps, and you can tell exactly where each gaps comes from which choice that you made, and which difference from existing capabilities exists. So that is the ideal entry point for building strategic objectives, because you aggregate the strategic gaps. Let's say you have 100. You can't work with 100 strategic objectives, but you aggregate them. You see that there are convergences, that they're related to each other, and you aggregate them into those 15 to 25 strategic objectives, and they are already in a cause-effect relationships based on what they are, where they are coming from. So it's relatively easy to morph the strategic gaps into strategic objectives on the four perspectives, or maybe you don't want to use four, but at least that's the starting point, and then to reassess the cause-effect relationship between the strategic objectives, and from that moment on to start creating the strategic initiatives, which, guess what, they are projects for closing the gaps inside the strategic objectives. So because you have build strategic objectives by building them around gaps that you need to close. If you achieve all your strategic objectives, you have accomplished that part of the strategy. And if you do that by tomorrow morning, you have accomplished that part of the strategy by tomorrow morning. So because you have that kind of granularity of what is inside a strategic objective, of course, you can formulate it based on the recommendation of how to create the name of the strategic objectives and so on. But then if you look at which are the strategic initiatives required to accomplish this strategic objective, you look at the gaps inside the strategic objective and say, what would we need to do? What do we need to purchase and install or train or whatever needs, depending on the strategic objectives? And those are the strategic initiatives that will help you accomplish the strategic objective by closing the gaps inside it. And guess what? When you go to KPIs, how do you guess that you create the KPIs is the best way possible? Look at the gaps again and say, which are the parameters that are going to be relevant for signaling us that we have successfully closed one gap or another? And that's how you create, for instance, you have like 4 gaps inside the strategic objectives. You have at least 4 KPIs specific to each of those gaps that needs to be closed, but that might be only the lag KPIs, and then you need to complement them with some lead KPIs depending on how the type of progress of the initiatives it's happening. So in this way, you have a traceability from the strategic choices to the capabilities required, to the strategic gaps to be closed, to the strategic objectives, to the strategic initiatives, and to the KPIs, which are going to tell you if you have successfully closed those gaps or not. And again, remember that they are based on hypothesis, and that's why we say that the KPIs are actually telling us if we have used valid or invalid hypothesis, not just on the strategy formulation side, but also in this strategic planning. Have we chosen the right cause-effect relationship between the strategic objectives? Have we associated the right initiatives to the strategic objectives? Have we defined the right KPIs or even the weights between them in order to calculate the status of the objective? And of course, we have a variety of other topics on the risk and resilience side, but at least this is some sort of image of how we can eliminate all the head scratching and all the guesswork and all the formulations generic about how to create the strategic objectives and the KPIs and the scorecards and so on. There is a very systematic and very logical process for doing that, as long as you acknowledge this kind of sequence of logic that it can be used in a let's say very pragmatic version of let's say the initial what the balanced scorecard used to be many years ago.
Yep, a very detailed explanation. So the strategic objectives actually will not be defined immediately after the strategy planning process. It's a part of strategy planning process. Okay, and it's a defining measure is not something will not come as part of best practices or something. It's to close the gap. Okay, so well said, Mihai. Now, Vishwanath, I think you have to leave now. So I'll just ask you to brief about the strategy translation and also give us some kind of tips so that we continue another for maybe half an hour or so. Okay, so please take your time to brief your thought process.
Right. So on the on the strategy execution, I think Mihai touched a lot of details. I think one critical area that I find lacking is initiatives management. Right. You don't just put an initiative because the functional head wants to do it, or you really don't do it because you think it's a fancy thing to do. Everyone is doing Six Sigma, we'll do Six Sigma, right? I think if you truly understand how initiatives help in bridging this gap, the value gap that Mihai talked about, I think you've nailed 50% of the problem in strategy execution. That's number one. Number two, I touched upon this point, the link between the strategic plan and the budget, right? Now, how much ever we try to do the strategic planning process, I'm very sure majority of the managers have it in the back of their mind that end of the day, I need to create a budget, right? And we all know that the most common way of preparing a budget is last year's number plus a percentage, a delta, right? A positive delta or a negative delta. Invariably, it's a positive delta. This has to break down. To me, that's a big challenge because I've seen a lot of companies, we do a strategic plan, we spend time in defining strategic initiatives. I can empathize with Alan. There's one company of mine which had about 40 initiatives. Had a tough time explaining to them that 40 is not something that they can do, right? Leave alone 10. I mean, I say I would be happy if you pick up 5 and do 5. But in parallel, the budgeting process is over, and we all understand that any initiative requires man, material, money, labor, right? I mean, we need that. Where is the synchronization? That's not happening. Number two. I think number three, we all touched on this point. Where it fails is, I think the example that Alan said, oh, we're not going to do the strategic review today, this time because it's a busy season, right? Or we're not going to touch upon strategic planning review this month because we all have a company offsite or whatever. I think the more volatile the environment, more you need to be agile, which means the more you need to be planning well. All right. Many CEOs think because it's so volatile, we don't need a strategic plan. I say the opposite. Furthermore, why you need a very agile strategic plan. You need to know which assumptions are going to hamper your business. If today, if you're in copper and copper is coming at a certain dollar per ton, if the copper price increases by 40% in China, your entire strategy is gone, right? All the more why you need to have a strategic review process combined with your financial review process every month. I think these are very critical aspects to make sure strategy is executed. Last point, we touch upon this, we try hard, but I think getting the N-2 people involved in why this strategy and why this initiative, I think is also important. Many organizations miss that part. It goes up to HOD level. Some HODs agree. I mean, the CXOs, some of them agree, some of them don't agree, but we take them along. But I think it's very important to cascade this further to one level below them, where they truly understand why a certain initiative is to be done, that cause effect. I mean, if my KPI of this initiative falls by 10%, what's the impact of the larger strategy? I think these would be very critical elements to translate and get precision and execution, according to me.
Thank you, Vishwanath. Very nicely said. Initiative is everything, actually. It should close the gap. So having said that, you touched very important 2 points, initiatives. Okay, of course, the objectives and measures Mihai has explained in detail. Now, Alan, what do you think about managing the initiatives, closing the gaps, and then making the proper budget for that? Okay, so now there is a when you go to the execution, okay, invariantly the thing breaks. Okay, finally they go to their do as usual, business as usual thing. Okay, they do up to that level, definition level. Then when it goes to real execution, then individual departmental siloed priorities will overshadow. So what do you think in your experience, Alan? How to avoid this?
Okay, there are a number of factors there, and they're all big ones. First of all, can I just give what people call a shout out for a concept called beyond budgeting? We talked a lot about the constraints of budgeting and all the traditional problems we associated with it, but there's no point in just complaining unless you have a better solution. And I'm quite attracted to the beyond budgeting concept. I used to be a member of the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. I just never had a chance to go to the meeting, so I kind of let that one lapse. But I try and keep in touch with their thinking. And slogans like "beat the competition, not the budget" are things which naturally appeal to me. So that's the first thing. In terms of how we manage the initiative strategy interface, it goes back to KPIs and target setting, because ultimately the way I look at it, what we're saying is the initiatives are basically there to deliver a change in performance level. And so we're into numbers, we're into the dreaded KPIs, and the shortcomings I see so often are related to the project management side, not a poor project management discipline as such, but the alignment to the strategy, the alignment to performance targets, and the inherent difficulty very often in looking at a strategic initiative and saying, what level of performance improvement do we want this initiative to deliver? The cost is usually pretty clear. The benefit may be described in different units of measurement, and therefore, how do we satisfy ourselves from a planning point of view that we have the appropriate initiatives? Initiative overload, which I mentioned very early on in this workshop, is a very, very common problem in my experience. And using a scorecard methodology, using the sort of approach that Mihai has been through, so I won't repeat all that, is a good process and discipline to say, wait a minute, we cannot manage all of these projects. Let's really get a sense of what is essential to execute our strategy and what is nice to do. And then the extent to which we're saying, and how satisfied are we that we have the capability to manage this project? And, you know, when I go into an organization, and one of the things I like to look at very early on is the monitoring of the strategic initiatives. And, you know, simple red, yellow, green, and obviously it can be a lot more sophisticated than that. But that gives you a very good indication of how well they are managing their key projects. Do they have too many? So I think there are a whole set of issues around benefits realization and alignment to KPIs. And there's lots of good issues on it. Someone's just put on the chat show, there's a chat line, there's a reference to it. Yes, I mean, I've seen that. I've done lots of training on that subject myself over the years. But ultimately, it comes down to human beings, this is not AI, human beings making a decision on which project should go forward and whether or not we believe that they will deliver the benefits that we're looking for. And so that sense of project evaluation is often limited. So that's a very common problem I see. So it goes back to a key issue, which is KPIs and especially targets. And I think I said this point already, but target setting, I find in so many organizations is horribly weak. People put in unrealistic targets. They'd love to achieve them, but they have no realistic means of actually delivering that level of performance. And going with that is accountability. And one of the things I see, and especially in public sector entities, is accountability is very limited. Everyone hides behind committees. And so when you haven't got accountability, you don't really have proper ownership. And people sit there and they'll do this. They point the fingers. You know, it's great that we want to improve customer satisfaction, to take a very simple case. Who's going to do it? Oh, everyone, but not me. I'm busy doing my little bit, but someone else is going to do it. It's just not linked up. So I think if you follow the discipline process that Mihai has summarized and link that in, but the discipline about selecting targets, KPIs and targets, and the associated discipline of the projects, the strategic initiatives, getting that right is not easy to do. And yes, there are lots of ideas and lots of concepts, lots of theories, but in real life, I see lots of practical problems in organizations where they simply don't get this organized as well as they should. And the inevitable outcome is strategy execution failure.
Fantastic. Excellent. Now, actually, the point here I like is the strategy, the ownership of the particular strategic objective or ownership of a particular measure. Okay. So when you cascade or when you translate strategy, you define strategic objectives, measures, initiatives. Okay. So how for the initiatives, there is some kind of project manager. Yes, at least there is an accountability because the project management as a profession, it is matured enough. When it comes to the strategic objectives, you define owner. Do you think they really take the ownership of the objectives? Organizations, do they monitor really the objective performance as required in a cause and effect way? What do you think, Mihai, in this point?
If we're talking about the ownership of strategic initiatives, these are projects which project teams, and as always, depending on the type of initiative, is it a capital project? Is it a process redesign project? You might have defined some sponsors first of all, and these it's a project management ABC, and also people who are team members or even those who are not part of the project teams, but are required to support the adoption of the effects produced by those initiatives. All these people have to be linked together by the KPIs as they have on their individual scorecards. If I participate in three projects which are strategic initiatives, I should have at least share the KPIs which are specific to the output and the outcomes of those strategic initiatives, because that tells me if I'm doing a good job together with the teams that I'm working with. And of course, in the larger picture, we can see if the cause-effect relationship between the objectives allow us to do a good job, not just as an individual objective or individual strategic initiatives, but as a system linked by causality. So I think that the importance is to drive down the measurement of performance, of strategic performance to individual level, and that means that there is a certain practice of how to do this. So for instance, in order to define my KPIs on my individual scorecard, I look at all the initiatives in which I'm participating, and as a result of that, I can see which are the objectives which I'm contributing to being achieved, and of course they are part of my department or my team, and there is a certain cohesion logic which allows us to identify the accountability for the outcome of executing the strategy. We just need to run the process fully, from organization to department, inter-departments as horizontal alignment, and then to individual. Because then, unless you make the individuals fully responsible of the outcomes of the changes that they are participating in, then those changes won't be successful. So at least this is how I've seen this the system work so far, and I think it's a very valid logic that works in practice.
Fantastic. So I'll just take technology. I would like to bring a technology into this. Now, the reporting of performance, whether it is an objective performance, a measure performance, or initiative performance, or risk management performance, or whatever. So reporting is something which is very important. Now we use spreadsheets, disparate systems to do that. Part of that is customized in the ERP and all. So I have a very bitter experience of getting fragments to report in a standardized way. That's the reason one of the key factor we developed a solution for the strategy management. Basically, started with primarily for reporting. Okay, so the role of strategy management system to make sure that everybody need to have the discipline to report it and reviews and all. So what do you think? Is that something which is important in the overall strategy execution, Alan?
You're probably asking the wrong person, because I'm notoriously disinterested in software systems as such. I'm focused on management issues. Clearly, it's important to have the right system, and there are all sorts of systems available, and the technology sort of changes almost day by day. I would go back to an earlier point, which is the technology, just as with the methodology, is less important than how it is used. And I think if you start to use whatever systems you have, and however rudimentary they are, if you start to use those effectively, you will quickly identify shortcomings, you will identify the gaps that need to be filled, and then you're on the road to migrate to a more appropriate and perhaps longer term software solution to whatever it is you're trying to manage. So my plea is start simple and think about it from a management point of view, not a technical point of view. I used to say years ago, and this was long before OSM came into our vocabulary, the Office of Strategy Management, way before that. I used to say, I've seen scorecard projects led successfully by various functions around the organization. I mean, corporate planning, finance, particularly the management accounting side, quality departments, HR departments sometimes have led very effectively. But I've always said there is one department you do not give the Balanced Scorecard project to lead, and that's IT. You know, this is not about systems and architecture. It's about management engaging with and understanding the strategy of the organization, contributing to it and keeping it agile as the world changes around us. So whatever we choose, use it properly. If that's in place, any imperfections will be driven through, I think, and you will migrate as necessary to something better.
The system should enable, but it should not be a priority how to drive. That's fantastic question. I think we are running into the end of the last part of the session. So let us quickly talk about strategy reviews. Okay, the strategy review process. How should we do? How often we should do? What are the key focus? Quickly, and then we talk about more interesting. Let's take up some questions from the gentleman. Yeah, Mihail. So what do you think about strategy review process? What is the best way to do it?
Well, the strategy review, it's important because the strategic initiatives are progressing at a, let's say, at a rate where the 1 month it's sufficient granularity to see some progress, and therefore we are able to measure some outcomes and some outputs on a monthly basis. In some cases it's valid, in other cases it's not. There are KPIs which are measured quarterly because we simply don't have the information on a monthly basis. But nevertheless, it's important to have a monthly cadence of evaluation. And in terms of the scope of the review, I've already seen strategy review meetings where the main question on the table was which hypothesis that we have used in our strategic planning or in our strategy showed up as being invalid, or are prime suspects as root causes for the things that we are looking at in the scorecards. And of course, in the scorecard, some KPIs are red or yellow, so and they have certain negative evolution, and say why did that happen. And the quest, it's always about which are the invalid hypotheses that we have used. For instance, the easy ones are where we thought that a certain project will have a certain effect, will produce a certain improvement, and it didn't. It will be easy to use, and that system, it's actually nobody understood how to use it properly. And those effects, those are hypotheses that we have used. And some other hypotheses may be further down the road into how we define the objective, and did those capabilities are actually necessary, or actually the wrong capabilities that we have put in place. And unfortunately, it's still more art than science of identifying the root causes of the negative results that we see on the scorecards. Hopefully, if we define the proper traceability in a very logical way throughout our models, the strategy model as a strategic plan model, it seems that some machine learning algorithms can help us and give us a list of top suspects of causes why some KPIs are red. Initially, I was very skeptical about things like this being able to happen, but when I saw the results, I realized that it might be that the machine learning algorithms will become a very interesting helper and very interesting instrument that in the background will allow, first of all, to shorten the duration of the strategy review meetings, because if we are having discussions, long discussions about what's the cause of this and what's the cause of that, we just get very long meetings. With the help of machine learning algorithm, I think that we will have much quicker some suggestions about what might be the causes of that, and we can do some checking, some verification, and then identify what exactly was which hypotheses are invalid. We need to replace them. We need to change those parts those parts of the plan that depended on them, and then we'll move on to the next month. So that's something that might change the ways that we do strategy review in the near future, I think. And in what regards the model review, where we gather up some fundamental errors that we did when we created the strategy or the strategic plan, and those are cases where the hypotheses are have such a big impact, and if we identify them as invalid, they are going to change a lot in the strategy or a lot in the strategic plan. So we need to prepare very soon for replanning, for changing part of the strategic plan or for changing part of the strategy. And those are separate meetings from the strategy review. Some people are called them progress reviews, the monthly ones. And we need to leave some time until we draw the conclusions that some part of our model, some more significant hypotheses are invalid, and do that probably on a quarterly basis in order to reach the conclusions. And then we need to update and to adapt some of the objectives, some of the hypotheses, some of the capabilities, some of the things that we have put in our strategy or in our strategic plan. So these are the two type of review meetings that I've seen working. And initially, the XPP recommended an annual strategy review, where we review the strategy itself, not the progress of the initiatives, which we do monthly. But we realize that even on a quarterly basis, we have in the cases that I've seen enough information to be able to understand that we might adapt our strategy or adapt our strategic plan.
Fantastic. One of the key, on top of what Mihai, you have explained very nicely, and Alan. Okay. So in strategy review meetings, people start debating about the measures. Okay, I think that's something which consumes a lot of time. If the managers who presenting are not prepared very well or before the meeting, okay, so if they come there and then they try to debate, this measure is not correct, that measure is not correct, and we are not responsible, especially when you talk about order fulfillment. A typical debate between manufacturing and sales is it happens. Like if you are not meeting demand forecast, it's about capacity or it's about forecast, it's about sales. So these kind of things, we have to eliminate in the strategy review meetings. They should be. So what do you think, Alan? Still they take place. What do you think? Yeah.
Okay, just a few quick comments because I'm conscious of time. The first obvious thing is chairmanship, or the chairpersonship, I should say, in these politically correct times. Whoever is the chairperson for the meeting needs to do the job properly. Many don't. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I like to use a concept that I call rules of engagement. And what I do is I set out basically the conduct of the meeting, how it should be conducted. And you have to address things like timekeeping. You have to address things like the phones and other interruptions. And if you don't get that right, you can have a well-intended meeting and all the good thinking that's gone in by the strategy team, and you have, a chaotic meeting because no one's come prepared. They're all busy on their phones. They come late. They're in and out for other meetings, and the whole thing just disintegrates. So I think that there has to be a real culture of discipline around those meetings. Can I share one example? This was a Kuwaiti company I worked with, and the chairman was the very strong sponsor for the work we were doing, which was basically to put in place a balanced scorecard system. And he said the monthly performance review meeting through the balanced scorecard was the most important single meeting of the month for the top management team. And he wanted them to meet in the boardroom, not in the normal sort of executives meeting room. In other words, one level more senior. He wanted people to feel that this meeting was crucial. It was more important. People, as it were, we don't wear ties these days, but we straighten our ties, we put our jackets on and so on for this meeting because it was in the boardroom, it's taken more seriously. So I think there's a lot of how the chairman of the meeting wants to conduct the session. And a good consultant can certainly help and mentor and coach and do all of these supportive things. Final point, if I think of review meetings, I'm sure we all drive cars. When we're driving cars, what percentage of time are we looking backwards through the rear view mirror and what percentage forward? And my guess is it's 90% forward, 10% back. Yet the average performance review documentation I see is 100% looking back. And it doesn't make sense. So I'm always very keen to encourage people to embrace some variation on the theme of a full year reforecast. So our review meeting is not simply looking at what has recently happened, what lessons can we learn, to what extent do we need to modify or reprioritize issues. But it's looking ahead to what do we expect for the rest of the year or for the next 6 months, or if we're using a rolling program, what have you. And simply to get people to focus on how we identify and avoid future blockages in the road, not simply recording what has happened in the past. That, for my money, would be a major improvement in the majority of scorecard systems that I see.
Fantastic. I think we are running out of time, so we have hardly left maybe 5 minutes because we started late. So what are the final thoughts, key takeaways for the audience and who are attending from different channels? So what are the key takeaways, Mihai, from your side for the people?
Sorry.
The key takeaways. Yeah, would you like to give a final thought? The key takeaways for the people for the participants and others. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that the discussion was very interesting, and the things that have been presented here are relevant for many strategy execution processes, and I think that the ways that we organize such a management system, it's important. The methodology is important. The leadership of the executive team is very important. The ways that we do even things like the strategy review meetings, organization and conducting them are a lot of importance. These are complex systems. We can use requisite complexity and requisite simplicity not to allow everybody to share the same level of complexity in order to be more manageable. But ultimately, we need to look at a lot of parts in movement. We need to build models which are depending on a lot of trends and weak signals, and there are things that we need to take into consideration: the logic, the causality, the sequentiality of the actions, the understandings that we plan a strategy for many years, and we make a strategic plan only for typically 1 year, and we have to split our strategy on execution cycles, on multiple execution cycles, each of them with a share of accomplishing the strategy and closing strategic gaps. There are a lot of things that come from understanding how the system works, and then once we do that, things move into the organizational culture, into how we do leadership, and how we involve people in participating in giving their feedback on various hypotheses that we're using inside the strategy, on how do we make them accountable, doing strategy at the individual level. And these are things that we need to take into consideration. There is a complex best practice collection that we need to take into consideration if we want to do this thing well. And it's also not very easy to do it from the very beginning. I haven't seen very good implementation in the first year, but guess what? In the second year and in the following years, the things started working very well inside the company because all the chips of understanding fell in place and the guys actually adopted well. I'll just give an example of people who have made such a system their own. I think it was like 10 years ago when I've been part of the team who have implemented the Kaplan and Norton Balanced Scorecard system at IKEA. And I have seen year after year how these guys are morphing the system into their own system, giving it the shape and color of their company, integrating it with other systems of management for the budget and for logistics and for other things, and they understood very well exactly how alignment is done, how the strategic objectives are created, how to manage the scorecards and so on. And I don't recognize, when I looked several years after the initial implementation, I didn't recognize the system. Actually, they made it their own. They made their own version of the balanced scorecard, and are very satisfied in using it. On another example, when balanced scorecard was implemented as a government level, there were 20 ministries, as I remember, and some of them didn't even understand what they have to do, but others, and I have at least 2 of them, actually started using the balanced scorecard strategy review even on weekly basis and replace their weekly meeting with actually a strategy review meeting. And it was surprising to see how they adopted the logic of the scorecards, the logic of the strategic objectives, and made it their prime management system inside those ministries. So I think that this system can work excellently if it's well implemented and if the people understand how to use it and there is leadership. That's probably the most important thing. And also one of the biggest things that people need to understand is the difference between managing operations and managing strategies. There are 2 different planets. If they understand the difference, then they are very, very advanced in using both.
Yeah. So thank you, Mihai, for extensive explanation. Okay, it's as usual. So you are really a master of all these. Okay, thank you, Alan. Final thoughts.
Okay, very briefly, 5 items. The important, and I'm focused specifically on execution, not planning. Number 1, the importance of good leadership. Number 2, the importance of good communication. If time had allowed, we would have spent more time on communication. Number 3, a culture of results, not excuses. I think that's a huge one. Number 4, rigorous monitoring. What gets measured gets managed. Without getting into all the KPI debate, it's a good discipline. And number 5, project management. If any of those 5 are missing, you have a major problem, in my experience. So otherwise, just to say thank you for being part of this. I've enjoyed listening to my two fellow panelists and learning from them, and I hope it's helped.
Yeah, I think you said everything what you have to say. So I just want to say that we have to build a performance culture. So the moment we have the performance culture in the organization, everything takes place. Any methodology can support. So I think having said that, I would like to conclude. There is a lot of, if any questions from the participants you would like to speak, Deep, maybe you can facilitate. It's a fantastic session. Mihai, Alan, and Vishwanath, it was a fantastic session. And I know we cannot cover all. I have a list actually, but I cannot cover all of them. But I think we justified the discussion in a given time. Thank you very much. And if you have any specific question, we'd like to hear for a couple of minutes, and then we would like to conclude. Dr. Salem, thank you for supporting this and attending. Philip, thank you very much. And okay, thank you all, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful new year ahead. Strategy focused new year, and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.